Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Van, and I am the staff lead for the small can regulation. I will be discussing potential amendments to our regulation for small containers of automotive refrigerant. This is our first workshop, and we are seeking input on our proposal. The webinar is being recorded, and the intent is to post the recording publicly. So just a reminder that any information that you share here may be accessible and released to the public. Everyone is muted. We'll start with introductions from our CARB team, then go over our proposed amendments, followed by a question and answer session and an open discussion. Finally, we'll cover the next steps after this workshop. We'll be taking comments and questions throughout the workshop, which will be addressed during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Type your comments in the Q&A at any time, and please reference the page number of the slide relating to your comment or question if applicable. If you have any technical issues, staff will be available to assist you. For verbal comments or questions, you may raise your hand, click on the hand symbol to be added to the speaking queue. If you're on your phone, press #2 to raise your hand. So let's do some brief introductions. As already stated, I am Van San, the staff lead for the proposed regulation. Darmin Liu is the manager of my section. Alex Wang is our senior attorney. Matthew Christian is our secret contact. Michael Fitzgibbon is my branch chief. And finally, our research division chief, Elizabeth Shield.
Good morning. It's great to see everybody online. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I'm Elizabeth Shealy. I'm the research division chief. Again, I just want to welcome everybody for our first workshop on the amendments, proposed amendments for the small cans or small containers of automotive refrigerants. The research division is actually responsible for several refrigerant-related programs, including recent regulations that just went into place on stationary commercial refrigeration, air conditioning. The refrigerant HFC 134A that's used in the small cans of automotive refrigerant is a short-lived climate pollutant and is key to reducing overall emissions of greenhouse gases and meeting our climate goals in California. Really look forward to the discussion and look forward to your suggestions and feedback during this workshop and the whole regulatory process to ensure the proposed amendments are scientifically sound and technically feasible. And with that, I will turn it back over to Van. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, we will go through an overview of the existing regulation, who is affected by the regulation, the current status of the deposit and recycle programs, the regulatory amendments that we are proposing, and the benefits of the amendments, followed by the next steps and ending with a feedback and an open discussion. Okay, so the regulation became effective in January 2011 with amendments made in 2016. This rule applies to containers containing between 2 ounces and 2 pounds of refrigerant with a GWP of over 150. The primary key requirements of the regulation include a self-saving valve on the container, the $10 deposit and recycle program, can certification and labeling requirements, and the use of unclaimed deposits on the enhanced education program that emphasizes best practice for vehicle air conditioning recharging and attempts to increase the return rate of the used cans. There are multiple entities that are affected by the regulation. This includes can manufacturers, can distributors, and can retailers. The small life cans life cycle starts with manufacturers selling the small cans to the distributors and retailers. From there, they're sold to do-it-yourselfers or DIYers for short and charge a $10 deposit. The DIYers return the used cans back to the retailers, distributors to get their $10 deposit back. The distributors and retailers working with the manufacturers facilitate the transport of the used cans to certified recyclers, where the can heel is extracted and reclaimed. The can heel is the leftover refrigerant emissions that we want to recover and are not allowed to escape into the atmosphere. To increase can heel recovery, CARB worked with can manufacturers and the Car Care Council to create an enhanced education program that emphasizes best practices for vehicle air conditioning and recharging in an attempt to increase the used can return rate. This program is entirely funded by the unclaimed deposits from small can users, with around 5.3 million a year, and 2.8 million of that come from disadvantaged communities, or DAC for short. DAC is responsible for 55% of all sales and returns. This program is mostly a paid media campaign reminding DIYers to return the used cans. The campaign included TV commercials, billboards, social media, radio ads, a universal return can center, and a website. This campaign was heavily focused on the DAC since the majority of all sales and all can returns occur in retail stores located in these communities. Here we have the return rate from compliance year 2017 to 2020. The paid media campaign was fully deployed in 2018 and partially deployed in 2018 and fully deployed in 2019 and 2020. Using 2017 as a baseline, we observed very low change in can return rates from 2018 to 2020. The paid media campaign was paused in 2021 to evaluate other options for using the unclaimed deposits. The regulation had met our greenhouse gas reduction outline in the regulatory package, though not in the way originally anticipated. Based on a 2006 study, we anticipated the deposit program will recover approximately 22% of the can hill every year. Since the program started, we have been averaging less than 4% of the can hill reclaimed each year. However, the self-saving valve achieved significantly more reductions than originally anticipated. Overall, the self-saving valve is very successful in reducing emissions, and the deposit program is less effective than we originally thought it would be. Due to the success of the self-saving valve, we want to keep this requirement. However, we are proposing to remove the deposit and recycle program and associated benefits. We are proposing that can manufacturers are to use a percentage of reclaimed refrigerants in small cans, which will allow us to continue to achieve greenhouse gas reductions in this sector. There will be also minor revisions for rule clarity. For the reclaimed refrigerant proposal, CARB is proposing that manufacturers use reclaimed refrigerant HFC 134A in small cans of automotive refrigerant when selling in California. So important things to know are there is similar requirement in the stationary refrigeration and air conditioning regulation that became effective January 1st, 2022. The reclaimed HFC 134A must be purchased from a US EPA certified reclaimer within the United States. Nationwide, there's sufficient reclaimed HFC 134A to meet this proposed requirement. CARB is requesting input from stakeholders on this requirement. The environmental analysis that will assess the potential for adverse and beneficial environmental impacts associated with the recommended actions that will be identified in the new small can regulation. The environmental analysis is prepared according to the requirement of our certified regulatory program under CEQA. The environmental analysis will be based on anticipated reasonable foreseeable actions undertaken by entities in response by proposed regulation, which could have the potential to cause indirect physical changes to the environment. CARB will use the CEQA environmental checklist in Appendix G from CEQA guidelines as a framework for assessing the potential for a significant impact resulting from reasonable foreseeable actions. The checklist includes criteria related to resource areas such as aesthetics, agricultural and forest resources, biological resources, cultural resources, geological and soil resources, hazard and hazardous materials, among others. The environmental analysis will be included as an appendix to the staff report for the regulation. The environmental analysis will include a description of the reasonable foreseeable actions that appear most likely to occur as a result of implementing the recommended actions, the potential adverse and beneficial impacts, feasible mitigation measures, and an alternative analysis. Staff welcomes input on the appropriate scope and content of their environmental analysis as it's being developed, including the reasonable foreseeable actions that may occur in response to the regulation, the potential significant adverse impacts, potential feasible mitigation measures, and feasible alternatives to the proposal that could reduce or eliminate any significant adverse impacts. The draft environmental analysis will be released for a 45-day public comment period within the proposed regulation. So there are multiple benefits to our proposal. It will align with the US EPA national program. DIYers will not have to pay the upfront cost and will save around $5.5 million per year from the unclaimed deposits. They will save fuel and time since they do not have to drive to the retailers to return the used cans to get their deposit back. The amendment proposal will also benefit lower income DIYers in the DAC, as our regulation currently disproportionately impact them, with 2.8 million average per year in unclaimed deposits and 0.85 million in average can sales. Now we'll go over the next steps and our preliminary timeline. We will have additional public workshops as needed and stakeholders to gather input on the regulatory proposal. We anticipate releasing a staff report and proposed regulatory language later this year. After it's released, there will be a formal 45-day public comment period. The board hearing for this item will be in late 2022. Please note that this is a tentative schedule and may change over time. That concludes our presentation, and we'll start with our Q&A session. Staff will answer the written Q&A. Staff will answer the questions written in the Q&A first. So let's see here. Okay, we got a question from Aaron Lowe. What studies is CARB relying on to demonstrate a sufficient supply of recycled refrigerant for small can needs? So we have a refrigerant database for our from our refrigerant management program and EPA data that shows the amount of national refrigerant supply available. And from what we saw, there's a sufficient amount, but we don't know but we'll work with the manufacturer and other stakeholders to find an adequate amount of, we'll work with you guys to see what's feasible for the required reclaimed refrigerant.
And I will just add, thanks, Van. We do believe there's a sufficient supply. We do ask and request your feedback and any information you have that may give us more information on this proposal as well.
Okay. That seems to be the only, oh, there's another one by Doug Cobalt. Will CARB consider creating a bounty type system to replace the deposit system? The bounty system will entice consumers to safely return canisters to proper handling facilities.
Hey, Van, maybe I'll take that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Doug, okay, for putting that in there. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think the bounty program would be kind of outside the scope of the regulation that we're proposing in the workshop today, but that is something that we would, like to work more closely with you and others on, if we could get something like that in place, what would that look like? Of course, always the touchy mechanism of where would funding come from and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an intriguing idea, and thank you for bringing it up. And we would like to explore the idea further with you.
Yes. Okay, we have another question from Tim Duff. Does all cans have to be 100% recycled 134A? We're exploring options for that one. We need to discuss that with the manufacturers and other stakeholders to get their input on that.
Yeah, Van, thanks for that answer, and thanks for the question as well. As Van mentioned during the workshop, we recently adopted a regulation in December affecting commercial refrigeration, stationary air conditioning, and in that regulation, there's also a commitment to use a certain percentage of recycled refrigerant, and that's a much larger sector than this one. So right now we don't really have the specifics on how much. I mean, of course, certainly 100% reclaimed would be ideal. That would be the gold standard for getting the most greenhouse gas per se reductions from this sector by using 100% reclaimed. But we certainly recognize and appreciate Aaron's question on the supply of it, and we want to make sure that it's not an undue burden. And right now in our investigations, the price delta is very minimal, if at all. And so of course we would take that into consideration, but we do want to work with stakeholders and at arriving at the percent reclaim that would be ideal for this sector.
Okay, we have another comment from Tim Duff. We need to have a 50-state can, not a one-state can for pricing. The can pricing is up to the retailers on that end. I think that's just a comment. Yeah. Okay. And
Christina Starr had her hand raised.
Hi there. Yes. Thank you, Van, and the rest of the CARB team for holding this session to share these proposed amendments. I'm Christina Starr with the Environmental Investigation Agency, and I just want to share our support for expanding our reclaim use requirement to this sector. As you know, we've seen it be proposed similar requirements for the stationary air conditioning sector. Just a general comment that, studies do show that there is wide availability of R134A in particular to be recovered, given the early adoption of this refrigerant in this sector in comparison to other sectors using refrigerants. So we see great potential and promise here for this. And I just wanted to also ask the CARB representatives here if there's a certain timeline in this process where it's helpful to provide for stakeholders to provide additional input and comments on this proposal. Thank you so much.
Hey, Christina, nice to hear your voice. Thanks for chiming in on this. We appreciate your support. I think as Van put up on the timeline there, we don't have a board date fixed yet. We're hopeful to do it at the end of this year. That's our target, but we have to be flexible with the board's schedule. And so we certainly want to be working with stakeholders immediately following this workshop to kind of iron out all these details. Once we get the board date in place, the standard drill where 45 days before the board meeting, we'll release our initial statement of reasons, which opens up the public comment. But we want to work with stakeholders beforehand, before we actually release the initial statement of reasons. So I'm hopeful that after this workshop, we'll be in contact with all the interested stakeholders, and we can have a lot of one-on-one meetings and hammer out some of these details. So we really look forward to working with you, Christina.
Okay, we have another.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Christina. We have another question from Micah Thompson. Will the cans still need to be certified? Yes, they do. Okay. Okay, is there any hands up? Any raise hands? Okay. Okay, Tim Duff, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
Van, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Yeah, my worry is as a retailer is I've talked to a couple of distributors of the stuff, and there's multiple manufacturers that don't play in California, specifically because of California's their can only problem. My understanding is that there are self-sealing cans throughout the United States. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So why can't, if there's recycling is fantastic. That's the way to go. Definitely. If you've got recycled gas out there, works just as well as remanufactured or new gas. So why wouldn't there be something on the federal side that says you need to use a percentage in there so that we have one can from New York to California? Okay. So that California isn't on its own island. That's the biggest problem we see with California is California goes out of their way to be way ahead of the game and put everything on their own island, and that drives the price up for us. Okay, in California, when you can buy it $3 or $4 cheaper from the state over. Okay, but it doesn't say California on the side of the can, even though it's the same can, the same Freon inside it. It's a competitive problem. And also a product problem, because you make a California only can, that means it's only sold in California. Okay, so that we're going to be stuck there. That's all I had.
Okay, we have very unique can labeling requirements in our can in California, with more instructions for vehicle AC recharging. There's a vehicle procedure reader and also safety on the cans. When I go to other states and look at other cans, they don't have any of that. And yes, it's very similar material with a difference in PHE content and leak detection content. But we had our cans, we can't control the retailing pricing on that. We just it's just the way it is for the small cans.
Yeah, and if I could add in there a little bit,
Yeah.
thanks for responding, Van, and I appreciate the question. You know, California, like you said, we do tend to be a leader on environmental regulations. Initially, the self-sealing valve, again, was an idea that started here in California. The feds took a close look at our whole program and decided to just take that aspect and not use the deposit and recycling program. And you know, we've kind of come to that conclusion. We need to get rid of that here. We're in conversations with our EPA counterparts. We're letting them know what we're doing here. We're hopeful that, again, much like the reg we adopted last December, it'll be something that will help prompt more of a national discussion to kind of come to, you know, kind of a nationwide content kind of that you're describing to have there. But, you know, the way to get that pushed is to start it here in California. I'm not sure if Elizabeth would like to add to that. Or...
No, I think that was a great response. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, Tim. Tim, would you like to add in any more feedback?
Sure.
Okay.
You know, that sounds great. And we, you know, California can be a leader, and they are in a lot of times, but sometimes they get in the way of their own themselves trying to lead when really it doesn't. It sounds like if it's a labeling issue, that would be easy enough to get the feds to jump on board and say, hey, this labeling makes sense. It doesn't have anything to do with a state thing. It has to do with whether or not it makes sense. Why wouldn't you just have that extra information on the side of it? It's not going to affect how the can operates. Okay, it's a, you know, pretty simple product. You know, that's the biggest thing I see is I just hate it when we come over there and put ourselves on an island and make something specifically for us just because we can. Okay, and it shoots us in the foot for supply on anything else. You know what I mean? Because we, you know, we're not going to be able to get Nevada cans if we run short. If a plant blows up wherever that's doing our stuff and California stuff, so okay, well, we'll be without it. You know, I'm a auto part store owner, and we're having that problem with oils and everything else. You know, the labeling that California does sometimes makes sense, and sometimes it's so burdensome that you can't get, you know, any other states to jump on board and allow you to, you know, still sell product.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I understand, and I hear the concerns and the frustration there. And, you know, I mean, that's why we do have to have good enforcement. We do it with other regulations we have, like consumer products, you know, making sure that cans or other products from other states aren't sold into California that would harm the retailers here. We're hopeful that the reclaimed idea is going to be such a great one that, you know, either the federal government or other states will adopt it and prompt federal action so that we can have consistency nationwide. But this is kind of the way to get it jump started. And again, we'll be working with you and others as we go through this regulatory process, just to make sure it's not an undue burden.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, let's move on to the next person. Aaron, go ahead, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. First, I just want to give a quick statement and just say thank you very much for this workshop. We strongly support the direction of eliminating the deposit and the recycle requirements, which we think are not necessarily are not needed anymore. We've enjoyed a great working relationship with CARB on developing the regulations, especially the self-sealing valve, and we look forward to working with the board, with the staff to try to implement these new changes. I think we have some concerns about the reclaimed deposit proposal and whether there'll be sufficient supply and different pricing issues that'll go along with that and the reality of how that will work. So we want to continue to work with you to try to work out those issues and resolve it. But you know, we're on board to try to work with you to try to make sure we have a great regulation. So thank you again for doing this. We do agree that it would be great to have a national standard, and we've also worked with EPA on trying to push the self-sealing valve, which I think has been extremely successful nationwide. So you know, you guys have definitely had a great leadership role in that.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron, Thank you for the words, and we've appreciated working with the Car Council over the years, and the close involvement you had with the education program as well, and appreciate your support on removing the deposit program. And again, we really do recognize that using reclaimed refrigerants is new, and so we want to make sure that we work with all the impacted stakeholders. And we've had conversations with the reclaimers because of the previous rule, so we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the amount of supply that's going to be available. Staff did do some research on that, and we're very comfortable that there's going to be sufficient, because we're going to allow reclaim from any US EPA certified reclaimer. It can be done, nationwide, so we're not limiting it to being reclaimed in California. So we're trying to broaden it so that there will be adequate supply at a very minimal cost differential.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Okay, we have some Q&A, one from Jake Fausbender of Energizer. He said, will this change the requirement for what's printed on the cans, or will California still require both English and Spanish in addition to other warning instructions copy on the label, which creates space constraints? So we will review that requirement for our can certification. This is something we have to look into. But most of those labeling is just to help remind the consumer to how to properly recharge their cans. And a lot of our consumer base in California do speak Spanish, so that we'll look into on how it will affect that consumer base. Okay, and another follow-up question by Jake Fausbender: will this remove all the reporting requirements or just those tied to the can returns? We'll review that too, because I know the annual reporting does have elements tied to the deposit and recycle program, like the can return data and the recycler reporting. We'll look into how what edits that we will need to make for the annual reporting requirements. Okay, and we have another question from Elizabeth Rowan. Will you be issuing a report of some kind that shows the data you presented for the proposed amendments? We'll show this proposed this presentation upload. It will be uploaded on our website. Yep. And yes, for data, we plan to create a technical support document, which has our appendices with a lot of contextual data relating to these proposed amendments.
Yeah, Elizabeth, thanks for the question. And if there's any particular slides where you have interest on where the data came from or staff's analysis of it, just let us know. We'd be happy to let you understand where we got it or how we came up with our numbers.
Okay. Okay, so the floor is open. If you wish to speak or have a comment or question, the floor is open. Just press on your hand symbol. And if you're on the phone, press #2. Okay, I don't see any hand raised or any questions or answers. Okay, if you have further questions or future questions, feel free to contact my email or contact me through my email, and we have our website right here. Besides that, thank you for showing up to our first but not the last public workshop. Does any of the other panelists want to say something?
I just also wanted to add a thank you for your questions and for attending today. And if you do have any comments or questions, reach out to us, and feel free to also submit comment letters to us with any information you want us to consider in the process.
Okay. 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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.